This is your preparation video for the group work Rationalism versus Organicism. You should also be using the assigned text, and please make sure you study this for the exam as well as by using it for the group work. This session will begin with a discussion of Bruno Zevi. You will need to be defining organic versus rational architecture. We will have two regional focuses. Italy, where Tirani and the modernist Gruppo 7 aligned with fascism, and Scandinavia, where the Nordic countries were beginning with their experiment with the welfare state, and so capitalist business ownership combined with strong governmental regulation. In Italy, the Catholic Church remained strong. In Scandinavia, although Lutheranism was the official state religion, the church functioned less as a place of worship than as a community center. Our first building is BPR. This tower is a mixed-use building in the middle of Milan, a city that in the 1950s had few modern buildings, but rather predominantly Renaissance and medieval architecture. Rainer Banham, who we already discussed in a previous treatise, criticized this building as a retreat from modern architecture. Rogers, the principal on the design, Ernesto Nathan Rogers, in turn, quote, mocked Banham as a, quote, custodian of Frigidaires, close quote. Although presented at SIAM in 1958, the project retreated from SIAM's rationalist, functionalist, universalist emphases in order to focus on the immediate context of Milan. Interiors are organized around services at the center. There are enlarged spaces at the top, which are the residential flats. The materials are predominantly concrete with metal windows. A second project, a bank and office building in Milan at Piazza Meda, is also a BPR project. One of the things to remember is that before World War II, an urban development plan had been formalized in Milan. That was actually in 1934. This was still in force and required that new buildings respect three piazza centers, one of which was Meta. According to that plan, this building would have a trapezoidal site bordered on three sides by monumental projects of the 1920s. However, BPR designed the building to accommodate the apse and dome of the much older San Fedele, so they softened the trapezoid site to a curve. The building, like the Torre Velasca, also pushes upwards. The sequencing of Y-shaped supports references the pilasters of the church. Giovanni Michelucci's Church of San Giovanni is named after John the Baptist, but the church is located at an interesting site at the crossroads of two Florence freeways. The church follows a modified cross floor plan that one would associate with traditional Christian churches with its transept and a nave, yet the vertical elements and copper roofing align with modernism. The walls are of stone and concrete. The copper roof is oxidized to green on the outside and burnished blonde on the inside. Marble, glass, and bronze are used for the interior elements, referencing many of the Renaissance churches in nearby Florence. The building's floor plan is asymmetrical and follows sinuous curves, creating a feeling of fluid space. Here we move to a very different context in Finland. This is a very different architect as well. Although his Paimo Sanatorium exemplified the ideas of functionalism after World War II, Alvar Aalto moved away from functional design based on mechanics to a concept of architecture that's related on a small scale to biological systems with a variety and richness related to nature. One of the things that Kalkun identifies as characteristic of Scandinavian modern architecture is the opening of the traditional Nordic courtyard to the outside. In Aalto's town hall, he nods to the vernacular by retaining semi-enclosed courtyards as would be found on farms. The emphasis is therefore on community. The unpaved steps visually nod to the green roofs of traditional Scandinavian farmhouses, as in his pool causeway at Villa Maria. Furthermore, the brick is handmade and alternates with clear varnished wood, especially on the interior. Sigurd Leverent's St. Mark's Church in suburban Stockholm is another example of what's happening in Scandinavia, this time in Sweden as opposed to Finland. Leverentz first worked with Asplund on an initial entry to the Woodland Cemetery competition, and was also involved in restoration projects at Uppsala and elsewhere. Leverentz's small parochial church in suburban Stockholm, like Aalto's town hall design in Finland, uses brick in the concept based on 3 shed-like brick structures. A detached wooden vaulted portico functions as a narthex and transitions to the central worship space from the atrium, which is here in the form of a Scandinavian courtyard. Flanking these buildings are 2 other buildings, one for administration and one to serve community needs for the church and for the town. Cohen describes this as a severe box in exposed brick. The interior wall surfaces carry on a tense dialogue with the elements in wood. Brick is used for the floors, walls, and roof, but it is mortar thickness rather than brick cuts that allow for the adjustments in height. Your final task is going to be to look at Ron Perrin and Peter Cook's plug-in city project that they did with Archigram in the 1960s. Why would this be included by Cohen in a chapter where he starts with the tour of Alaska? And why, what does this have to do with regionalism and modernism? This will be a task where you're going to have to use some critical thinking. How does the concept oppose or confirm the ideas of either organic or rational architecture?